The notion that scientists and mainstream media are dishonest about global warming is a pervasive conspiracy theory that has gained traction in recent years. Proponents of this idea argue that there is a deliberate effort to deceive the public about the severity and causes of climate change. However, a closer examination of the evidence and the motivations of scientists and journalists reveals that this claim is largely unfounded. One of the primary reasons scientists and journalists are accused of lying about global warming is that they are supposedly motivated by financial gain. It is claimed that researchers receive funding from governments and organizations that have a vested interest in promoting the idea of climate change and that this funding influences their findings. However, this assertion is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of the scientific process. Researchers are driven by a desire to understand and explain the world around them, not by a desire for financial gain. The scientific method is designed to minimize the influence of personal biases and external pressures, and the peer review process ensures that findings are rigorously tested and validated before they are published. Another reason for the accusation of dishonesty is that the media is seen as having a liberal bias, and that this bias leads to a distorted representation of the facts about climate change. However, the overwhelming consensus among scientists is that human activities, particularly the burning of fossil fuels and deforestation, are significantly contributing to the increase in global temperatures. This consensus is not based on ideology or politics, but on a thorough analysis of the evidence. The media's role is to report on this evidence and to provide context and explanation, not to promote a particular agenda. It is also argued that the warnings about climate change are exaggerated, and that the consequences of inaction are not as severe as scientists claim. However, the evidence suggests that the opposite is true. Climate change is already having a profound impact on the environment, from more frequent and intense natural disasters to rising sea levels and melting glaciers. The consequences of inaction will be catastrophic, from devastating heatwaves and droughts to the loss of entire ecosystems and the displacement of millions of people. Furthermore, the idea that scientists and journalists are lying about global warming is often based on a cherry-picking of data and a misrepresentation of the scientific consensus. Climate change deniers often point to short-term fluctuations in temperature or other metrics as evidence that global warming is not real, while ignoring the long-term trends and the overwhelming evidence from multiple lines of research. They also often quote individual scientists or studies that appear to contradict the consensus, while ignoring the fact that these views are not representative of the broader scientific community. In addition, the accusation of dishonesty is often leveled by those who have a vested interest in promoting the idea that climate change is not a significant problem. The fossil fuel industry, for example, has a long history of funding research and propaganda campaigns aimed at casting doubt on the science of climate change. These efforts are designed to delay or prevent action on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and to protect the interests of the industry. In conclusion, the claim that scientists and mainstream media are lying about global warming is unfounded and misleading. The evidence from multiple lines of research is clear: human activities are significantly contributing to climate change, and the consequences of inaction will be severe. The scientific community is driven by a desire to understand and explain the world, not by a desire for financial gain or ideological bias. The media's role is to report on the evidence and provide context and explanation, not to promote a particular agenda. It is time to move beyond conspiracy theories and to focus on finding solutions to the pressing problem of climate change. By working together and relying on the best available evidence, we can reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, transition to renewable energy sources, and mitigate the worst impacts of climate change.